please call the state candidates up to their seats. We'll be starting in 1 minute. Okay, I'm going to get started now. So again, if I could get the state candidates to please come up to their seats in the front. So welcome to the Anacortes Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs Annual Candidates Forum. My name is Jessica Kaiser, and I'm the President and CEO of the Anacortes Chamber of Commerce. Today's forum will provide a revealing look at the races of Legislative District 10 for the Senator seat, as well as State Rep Position 1, and the Skagit County Commission seats for District 1 and 2. Some of the rules for this evening: a reminder to please turn off your electronic devices. The forum is being live recorded to be shown on Channel 10 and on the City of Anacortes' YouTube channel. We ask that the audience members not record the forum. We have invited all opposed candidates from each race. The candidates will be seated next to their opponents in each race jurisdiction. Please hold your applause until the end of each race. The public was solicited for questions prior to the forum, and due to time constraints, we will not be able to take questions from the audience. Introduction and closing statements. In the interest of fairness, we conducted a coin toss before meeting to determine which candidate will speak first in each race. Following opening statements, our candidates will be asked a series of questions that were developed by our Government Affairs Committee. Alternating first response positions, each candidate will be given a 2-minute response period to the question posed. In the second segment of the forum, the candidates will pose their own question to their opponents. In this segment, each candidate will have 1 minute to pose their question, and their challengers will have 1 minute to respond. In order to help our panelists track their response time, we have Julia and Margaret from the League of Women Voters here helping us today, and they will be holding the handheld timing signs. First, you will see the 1-minute notice, then the 30-second, and finally a stop, which means your time is up. So if you fail to stop, you will hear this gentle notification that your time is up. Let's begin. And before we begin with candidate introductions, I also wanted to recognize other candidates here. Gary Ray, if you could please wave. Thank you, sir. He is also running for State Rep Position 2 for District 10. Thank you, Gary. For introductions, please introduce yourself and your campaign. You have 2 minutes each, and we will begin with Janet.
Hosting this event, and for all of you for showing up and working to be informed. State Senate seat for the 10th Legislative District. Just a little bit of personal information. Can you hear me? I should know that. I'm a county commissioner. For personal information, I'm a county commissioner, and we have to. How about now? Let's just start over. How much of my 2 minutes have I wasted? I'm Janet St. Clair. I'm running for State Senate and for the 10th Legislative District. I just want to introduce myself. I'm a teacher, a social worker, and currently a county commissioner in Island County. My husband John and I retired up to this region after he finished 30 years at Boeing. I had 30 years as a social worker. We have 11 children because we were both foster and adoptive parents. I'm running because I think it's important that we protect all that we love in this place we call home. I've been working on environmental issues such as forest stewardship and conservation. I did use up my 2 minutes in just having to push my buttons. I want to make sure that we protect working families, jobs, and living wage jobs, and most importantly, healthcare access and affordability, as well as women's right to make their own reproductive healthcare choices. I'll work hard, I show up, I listen, and I hope I can earn your trust and your vote as the next state senator for the 10th LD.
Thank you. Next up, Clyde.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Clyde Shavers. I am your current state representative in the House, position 1. Serving as your state representative has been one of the most meaningful endeavors in my life, and I truly appreciate your support and you being here, being involved in our political discussion. I currently serve as the vice chair of the House Education Committee, so kindergarten through 12th grade. I'm also a member of the Capital Budget Committee and a member of the Innovation, Community Development, and Veterans Committee. So those 3 committees, and I'm also a member of the Artificial Intelligence Task Force. A lot of these committees, and I mention all these committees and my role in them because we have so many priorities and concerns that need to be shared in Olympia. My goal has always been public service, lifelong public service, in ensuring that your story is being heard every vote I take, every policy I make, every time I stand up on the House floor, it is for you. So we passed 7 bills in the past 2 years, and we also co-sponsored over 30 bills. All these bills really address a myriad of different issues ranging from veterans assistance, military assistance, to environmental protection, to lowering your cost of living, for example, by working with colleagues to expand the property tax exemption program so that more seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities can ensure that they live in their home forever. We've also worked a lot on education, me being on vice chair, really ensuring that our kids can grow into being wonderful adults through unique career learning opportunities, as well as ensuring that there's funding in our special education, funding for our school buildings, funding for our teachers and para-educators and support staff. So a lot that we've done, but I really appreciate you being here. I'm looking forward to sharing all the things we've done during this forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Carrie.
Hi there. My name's Carrie Kennedy. I'm running for the LD10 position 1. And I got into the race because I believe that we need representation by we the people. I've been on Whidbey Island for 37 years. My husband's retired Navy, and we had our only daughter when we retired, and we could have gone anywhere, and my folks had retired up here, and we decided to raise our daughter in Coopville. I gave up a job to be a stay-at-home mom. I had an opportunity to go get my teaching degree and decided I didn't want to do politics, so I ended up in the classroom up until around 10th grade with my daughter down in Coopville. And when I decided to run for Congress in 2020 and 2022, it was mainly because I was frustrated where the country was going. I didn't like what was happening. I lived in the state under a Republican when we first got here for governor, and since then have not had another one. And I just decided that it was time. I have lived overseas. I've witnessed what other countries have gone through, and I just did not care for what was happening. But the biggest thing that I saw was that there wasn't representation from for the people. We the people, us citizens, just did not have the common sense citizen going into the legislature or into politics, and I felt that that was important, and I wanted to be that person. I decided to run for the LD10 position because I believe with all my heart that we need to have people that have honor, integrity, and people that can be trusted. And I'm going in, not ever being into politics, but I'm a quick learner. Every job I've ever had has usually been due to a problem and coming in and resolving it. So I feel like going down to Olympia is going to be a real privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ron.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you for the chamber. And I appreciate the fact that I was one of the lead endorsed candidates from the Association of Washington Business. I'm a reluctant politician. By trade, I'm a farmer. When I got home from Washington State University, I was asked to begin serve on boards, and that led to 30 years serving on boards of directors and committees and the like, from local nonprofits to fire district to Fortune 200 companies. I was asked in 2019 to put my name into the appointment process. I was appointed in 19 and then elected in 20. In Olympia, as the 10th current senator, I sit on Ways and Means, Rules Committee. I'm ranking on Ag and Natural Resources, and I'm assistant ranking on Health and Long-Term Care. We've passed 13 bills. Majority of them are environmental related, whether it's removing toxics from the marine environment or derelict vessels, and healthcare. But also serving on Ways and Means, I'm in a position to be able to ask for provisos. Provisos include a lot of things, but it's money for projects, but largely for healthcare, environmental, but also for things in the district. So I've been proud to be the senator. It's work, and at times it's real work because it isn't a lot of fun. There's not a lot of glory, and there's a lot of work in the job. But why I do it, I'm the 4th generation. I got 2 more generations on the farm, and I'm concerned about their future. And as the father of 3 daughters and of 6 granddaughters, 2 of the daughters are on the farm and 4 of the granddaughters are on the farm. So there is a future. We have to make it as accommodatable as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. For question number 1, this will be for all 4 of you. If you had the opportunity to build bipartisan support for a single bill of your choosing, what would it address, and how would you build your support? We'll begin with Clyde.
This is a tough question. It's tough because we've actually been in the process of drafting numerous bills already, and so I have to pick my favorite maybe. But I think we need to really address affordable housing. This conversation about ensuring everybody, no matter how old you are, no matter where you're from, the ability to actually afford a home is extremely important. And so right now we are actually in the process of talking to folks, the Building Codes Council, for example, on introducing unique and innovative ways to address this crisis. And I believe one of those ways is actually looking into new technologies. We understand that this affordable housing crisis is due to several factors, one being the lack of supply. And so recently I went down to Seattle to actually personally witness and explore the use of 3D printing technology in the use of building affordable housing, using this new technology to rapidly build small homes, for example, to ensure that we have less waste, environmental waste, when we're building homes, and also to lower the cost of homes with less workforce needed. I think if we can push this bill, we can enter a new future where we use technologies, where we use what is at hand, because our job is to solve tomorrow's problems today, and that's with 3D printing technology and affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie.
This was probably one of my favorite questions so far, but education would be what I would want to work on. I think we're in a terrible crisis, not only in Washington State, but within the country. I think we need to get, it involves everybody. It's not a party issue. I think that right now with the, in Washington State, we are at a terrible fail. And I look back at My daughter had scholarships here in Washington State, chose to go to the University of Utah, electrical engineering and political science. And her first semester in one of her math classes, she called and told her dad and me, I have no idea what they're talking about. And she was in the top of her class. That was scary. She's been out of school for 10 years, and I'm concerned that our young people are leaving the high school and not able to go out and get productive jobs and do what they need to do. And we have got to get a handle on this. I think that the salaries that the teachers and superintendents in Washington State is astronomical. I think that we've got to get a real handle on the budget. And I think bipartisan people would agree. We've got to look at the budgets and start figuring out why our kids are failing. So,
Thank you. Ron.
Well, thank you. In each of the last 2 sessions, I've passed maternal health bills. The first of which, 5580, created more care for addicted mothers and treating them for the addiction and the addiction that sometimes passed on to the babies. And 5580, this last year I passed 5581, which would take out co-pays for maternal health. Insurance companies are required to provide the insurance services, but often there were co-pays and others. So we asked the Office of the Insurance Commissioner to look at that and determine how much that was going to cost long term, taking away the co-pays and providing this full benefit. So both of these bills passed unanimously in the Senate, unanimously in the House, and passed by the governor. So this next year we'll offer legislation to accommodate that. The Office of Insurance Commissioner showed that this wouldn't be a cost to society, a huge cost to society, but would have a tremendous impact for those mothers who are looking to have those babies. This has been my background in my legislation. Majority of my legislation passes with a high percentage of yes votes in the legislature. So we'll continue on with that manner.
Thank you. Janet.
So I've worked on bipartisan legislative efforts, first as an advocate and then as a county commissioner, both on the federal and state level, including working on finance reform and health care. But I'm going to answer the question because of a conversation I had today with our sheriff and talk about public safety. We've had a challenge in retaining and recruiting and making sure we have adequate public safety, especially in our rural counties. And he and I had a long conversation, and we began to brainstorm of how can we legislatively take a look at creating predictable, sustainable funding for law enforcement that isn't subject to the vagaries of like we had in 2008, the recession, which really hurt our local law forces. We try as county commissioners to create competitive wages, but the problem has continued. And I think we've done just remarkable things with House Bill 1590 and creating sustainable funding for workforce housing, in other sorts of legislation where we've created a basis of sustainable funding. And I'd like to have conversation with WASPIC and others and see how do we create that same predictable, sustainable funding for our law enforcement. I hear at the doors all the time that's one of the issues that people are wondering about and wanting to feel safe and secure in their own communities.
Thank you. Question number 2, also 2 minutes each. A common threat to business, which is cited by local business owners, is overregulation, fees, and taxation. What is a practical solution to minimizing this threat? And we'll start with Carrie.
One of the challenges for me is I'm the only one up here that's never held a legislative or any kind of a political. So I'm going to be real honest, I don't know. One of the things that I'm bringing to the table representing you all is understanding what these kind of issues are. And I'm going to be honest, and if I don't know, but when I get into the job, that's where the learning curve and learning and understanding what's going on. So I'm going to just pass on this one, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Ron.
I sold my first calves for profit when I was in the 8th grade. So I guess you could say that I've been in business since I was 14. Having spent a lifetime in business and then going to Olympia was really an eye-opener, because I listened to things on the floor of the Senate that are honestly not true. One of those is that we don't respect our employees. We wouldn't be in business if it wasn't for our employees. 2, that if you're in business, you make a lot of money. That is not always true. There are months and years where you wonder if you're going to be in the business the next year because they just don't go like you plan. So when we see things like B&O tax or personal property tax, those are immaterial of whether you made money that year. You can pay a B&O tax and you could be paying the bank at the same time. So I've tried to be very involved in the conversations and education, whether it's in the floor or whether it's in the hall, about the vagaries of business. It isn't all profit. And most of us who are in business, we don't do it just for the money. We do it because it's something we love to do, and we're willing to make the sacrifice to make that happen. So education, working across the aisle, which I do a very good job of, trying to get that information out there, but being involved and trying to educate and going on these tours with people who've not been exposed to it before. So that is, when a bill comes up that its unintended consequences are negative for business across the board, telling the story. People's minds aren't changed by argument, they're changed with stories. And that's the most important thing that I can do down there, is educate by telling real stories. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet.
So I think this is going to be one where my opponent and I are in some agreement. I think the B&O tax has been a burden on businesses since I was in private practice, 25 years ago. And we've long needed to fix that B&O, figure out how do we do a better job on making it easier for businesses to be in business. I've been concerned, another small business I've been concerned about that is facing what I consider overregulation. I had the chance to talk with Senator Mazzal, Clyde Shavers, and Rep. Paul about it, is the increasing and burdensome regulations on our child care centers. Our region is at a dearth of child care. We are a child care desert, and working families rely on child care to be able to go to work and have a good job. And I feel like DCYF has gotten a little, I fought for 3 years on some regulations, and finally we solved the problem with money, but we should not be solving regulatory problems by throwing money at it. We should be simplifying the regulations and making it possible for things like small businesses and child care centers to thrive. So those are just a couple of examples of where I feel like there's probably a lot of agreement at this table, and that we all want to make sure that we have a business economy that thrives. I've been a member of our Chamber of Commerce for several years. I'm on the I'm a board member for the Economic Development Council in Island County, and I'm on a statewide economic development board called the Community Economic Revitalization Board, and we just spent a time visiting here in Skagit County and Maverick Marine and seeing the 75 jobs we've created with investments that are local. We need to support local business, and we need to support housing and childcare so that the people who work there can thrive.
Thank you. Clyde.
So I believe that one of the solutions of many different solutions is to focus on targeted tax alleviation for these businesses. Like mentioned before, our businesses, no matter how large or small you are have narrow profit margins. And so how does the state help that? How does the state help our employers and employees? So for example, a couple months ago, I was down in JBLM, a base around the Lacey area, talking with the military department. And we are currently, and they're doing most of the heavy lifting, and I'm supporting, a bill that will provide tax relief for businesses that employ low-income or homeless veterans, businesses that employ active duty spouses, businesses that are started by veterans. How do we support those veterans? No veteran should ever be homeless. And that's one of the ways we can help our businesses as well as our military folks. Another thing that was mentioned was childcare. How do we provide the tax incentives for businesses to take on this role in childcare? Because we all know our employees need that as well, and our employers will benefit from those employees getting childcare. So we're looking at tax benefits as well. On the ag side, because ag also has very, very slim margins, how do we support our farmers? So last session, we introduced a bill that provides tax relief for farmers or farms that are in a conservation program. So how do we find this way to alleviate these taxes on those who need it and the businesses that need it as well? Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 3. The state has adopted aggressive green energy policies that are making housing more unaffordable for working families. What amendments would you support in order to reduce the cost of transitioning to the green energy goals for those who can't afford them? And we'll begin with Ron.
So supply and demand is certainly a huge issue when it comes to housing, but the cost, whether it's local permitting, time is money. It seems to take longer all the time to get through permitting. And then what we have had, and it is a state-appointed committee on energy and housing, have made it far more expensive to build a home and more complicated too. So our caucus has a member on that committee, and it is very much a stacked committee because it's appointed. And what we see is that a lot of these energy codes, when it comes to homes, increasing the cost. In fact, we estimate that the cost of a home due to state regulation has been increased between $100,000 and $125,000. Well, this is out-of-pocket cost that there isn't a return on. We need to take a really hard look at a bunch of these rules, and most of them are rules. They've been accommodated by legislation, but then they're rules. We need to take a really hard look at these rules and determine whether or not they're having the intended effect. Honestly, we haven't measured the carbon emitted by the state of Washington since 2019. So we have a bunch of regulation and costs that we see no return on investment at this point in time, and we need to stop it. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet.
So earlier in my campaign, I was meeting with some folks in Mount Vernon, and one of them was a developer of affordable housing and smaller housing, like 1,000 to 1,200 square feet. And one of the things she raised as an issue to me was that the new energy codes are challenging. A lot of those come from federal to state and down, are challenging to implement on a scalable level for the smaller homes, the homes like you and I probably, my first home was 800 square feet, 2-bedroom, 1 bath, vacuum the whole thing from one outlet. And so, but that was a starter home. That got me started, that helped me build equity. And she was saying that they specialize in those kinds of homes and stock plan homes. And for them, the scalability of those energy codes is a barrier, is challenging, versus a large developer that's doing a multi-million-dollar home or a $850,000 home, or others have more margin in that to be able to accommodate it. So our goal is affordable housing. And I think we can thoughtfully look at the problems she raised and find exemptions for where we're really focused on workforce housing. How do we mitigate that? How do we change that in such a way that those folks who are really dedicated to building affordable stock, not millionaire houses, not huge developments, but the stock of housing we need for our working families and a step-down housing for seniors, how do we help them be successful in that effort? So that's just a small, but I think very important example of where you go listen to people, they'll provide the solution. I think we can mitigate that or find flexibility in that maybe we can apply in Washington State.
Thank you. Clyde.
So I imagine this question points to a recent bill that passed, I believe House Bill 1589. It's the PSC gas bill. I want to make sure everyone's aware that I voted no on this bill. I voted no against my caucus because I was gravely concerned, seriously concerned about the impact on low-income communities, vulnerable communities, communities that can't support it. And that, to me, I think it's important for a public servant, for a state representative, to go against their own caucus sometimes, their own party, because of the ideals that person has, the courage to actually support those who need that support. I think this question really pertains to how do we lower energy costs? And so last session, our office was the first office to pass the first fusion technology bill ever in Washington State. I think we need to grow our holistic energy portfolio so that not only are we using solar or wind or hydro, but can we use new technologies to lower the cost of energy? Imagine a world where we have fusion plants, stars on Earth everywhere, where siting or environmental assessments is no longer needed or it's not cumbersome, where now we live in a future where our kids or their kids take energy for granted. That's the fight that I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for our kids to make sure that this question is irrelevant one day. Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie.
So I've lived overseas most of my husband's military career, and I think one of the things that I would love to explore is what's going on outside of the States. There's a lot of unique ideas here, but there's also a lot overseas. One of the concerns that I have with a lot of the energy issues that are coming down, my husband's a engineering tech out at the base, and I've got some construction background, and I've got senior friends that are going out and buying an EV car, and they're getting I can go home and have my EV station set up and blah blah blah, and I'm like, have you had an electrician come out and look at your house? They're living in a 50, 60-year-old house. Well, guess what? They can't. So I think that we need to educate the public, find out what the needs are for these, requirements that are coming down with the green energy, and helping educate what is actually needed. Because if we're not going to have the technology in place and the infrastructure that's required, I think that we're kind of just running back and forth trying to figure out. But I do think that having lived overseas, I spent 3 years in Japan, and I think we need to look at some other technologies. I think, like Clyde said, there's some technology that's out there that we definitely need to explore. So, thank you.
Thank you. Question number 4. Many business owners and homeowners in Washington are facing rising property insurance premiums, in addition to premium increases due to factors like the cost of building materials, extreme weather, claims history, and bottom line profit. Insurers are also restricting or stopping coverage for certain property types, such as multifamily buildings and condominiums, or in high-risk areas like flood or fire zones. What legislative measures would you support to address these issues and help Washington businesses and homeowners maintain access to affordable insurance? We'll start with Janet.
I thought this was a very interesting question, and so spent a little bit of time thinking about it. We are seeing property insurance claims and cancellations to homeowners after an event, fire, flood, other kinds of disaster, and they don't give the property owners an opportunity to mitigate, to build that resiliency. And an example would be implement a FireWise program, something that many of us who look at fire prevention can talk at length about. How do you build your property and your home to be FireWise? That's mitigation that a homeowner should be allowed to do in order to still maintain their fire insurance. I think that those also allowing for community mitigation and the things like we're doing in our counties and cities on the comp plan that is building resiliency also helps keeps insurance rates down for homeowners. At the bottom line, if we don't have a healthy insurance market, and we have to go, Washington State has a state insurance pool for what's called the uninsurable. And there's, I think, 200 to 300 people on that pool in our state. Other states like Florida and states that have seen huge natural disasters, they have thousands of people on that pool, creating a challenge for that state. If we maintain and support our insurance industry so that we have that market economy, that we have the ability to support it, but we also hold them accountable, we're in the best of two worlds, and we don't end up getting the state overburdened with the state insurance plan. So I think we have to look at this as the opportunity that we have as a state and a county and as individuals to build our own resiliency, to be able to do that mitigation, to keep our rates low, to keep our community rates low, such as our fire districts talk about, in order to be protecting our insurance and protecting consumers.
Thank you. Clyde.
So I appreciate this question, very detailed question, and frankly, I haven't been asked this question so far during this time frame, so it's always good to understand new concerns. I think the first thing is to address the actual problem. The problem is extreme weather, for example, like this question mentions. And our office is dedicated to combating this using appropriately and cost-effective way state funds. So for example, last year, we were successful in providing, I think, about $1.9 million for a dike and a fish levee passage between Camino and Stanwood. That was because we saw continued flooding, more frequent flooding, and extreme flooding in that area. So how do we ensure that the state comes in to provide your support so that you don't have to worry about flood insurance, for example? We're also really focused on what building materials are being used to afford homes, for example. So we provided funding for workforce housing in Coopville, funding for affordable housing in Stanwood and Mount Vernon and Arlington. And all that is involving what building materials are we using. Like I mentioned, for 3D printing, we're actually also looking at what building codes are allowable for this new, more resistant building material so that we don't have to worry about, what happened in California where the insurance agencies actually departed because they can't cover it. In the end, our office is always focused on, not on the insurance agency side, but on you. How do we make sure that your home is affordable, that your insurance is affordable as well? And lastly, I know I have 30 seconds, but as Vice Chair of the House Education Committee, we're also working on this issue on the education side, insurance. How do we tackle that as well? So this is not just a one home or a one community effort. We need to really look at this holistically on all entities, all aspects, and figure out how do we make sure insurance is affordable and stays affordable.
Thank you. Carrie.
So I think this is one of those issues, again, not being a legislator, I just know that from talking to friends and relatives, most of the people that I know are military, and I think like Janet said, when you have a situation and something happens and then the next thing you know, you've got an insurance rate that goes off the chart. I think that we've got to make it honest and fair for everybody. I don't think that we should be doing one fits all because I think all of us have unique situations. So I'm going to pass the rest on. Thanks.
Thank you. Ron.
Insurance is a really interesting industry, and I get pretty deep into health and long-term care. The Office of the Insurance Commissioner in the state of Washington, which we're going to have a new commissioner here coming up for the first time in years, has a delicate balance. So we need to regulate the insurance industry. But if we over-regulate, they leave the state. And if they leave the state, then we've lost this competition, which keeps these rates low. This, like I say, as somebody who pays way too much for insurance, both on the farm, but also because we're processing food products. So we've got liability, we've got all of these things, and a lot of them are acquired from the stores that we deal with. It isn't just those. Our school districts are struggling with insurance, both L&I and property. And a lot of that is coming from dealing with children who are unruly, and there are injuries to teachers, but also damage to the buildings. So there's a very delicate balance there. But I was just notified that one of our insurers for a Medicare supplemental is leaving the state. And this is probably largely due to over-regulation. So I don't think there's an easy answer. I really don't. We just got to be careful. One of the things I always warn everybody is that when you walk into a situation, don't villainize a party. If you're going into a situation where you're immediately saying they're the villain, they're the reason for all the problems, you've got to get everybody to the table, and that means that everybody has to be on a level playing field. Doesn't mean that you're going to be equal in the end, but you're going to be fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 5. How will you work to expand vocational training for construction trades in all avenues, including apprenticeships? We'll start with Clyde.
So I really like this question. So again, as Vice Chair of the House Education Committee, my goal is to provide as many opportunities for our kids. I don't believe that every child should go to college or university. I think they should be exposed to all the different types of trades and jobs that are available, not just in their area, but across the state. And so last session, we passed a pretty big bill, House Bill 2236, that looks at all the career learning opportunities in our high school. The whole point of that bill was to ensure that the child in Eastern Washington has the same career learning opportunity exposure to the child here or in Vancouver, for example. How do we ensure that everybody has those opportunities? Second, we passed that bill. It also includes introduction of healthcare curriculum into our high schools. That's because we know that long-term care, there's a workforce shortage right now. We know that we don't have enough nurses or medical assistants. So how do we get young people excited to serve in our communities in these roles? And so that was a really big kind of push for me, and I'm so proud to have passed it. So right now we are drafting a bill that translates this to the maritime industry. And folks, that's because we need young people excited to serve in our ferries, in the ferry workforce. So I think by utilizing the talents and enthusiasm of our young adults, being able to have those programs, culinary or carpentry or aerospace, we can really get young people more involved. And I think that will allow our state to grow with new apprenticeships, with new programs, and we're just going to see a great need across our state being addressed by young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie.
So this was probably my favorite question since I am an education person. One of the things that the country's facing right now is construction trade industry is really in trouble. And after COVID, we saw what happened. I think one of the issues in the public education, we've got to get back to VOTEC. We need to bring back shop classes and go back to the basics. Like I said earlier, we've got to get our kids able to get into the workforce, and we are in a serious crisis. My husband's out at the base. The trades that he deals with, mostly construction, are in serious trouble. We don't have the young people coming in that have the skills, and they just can't walk in when they're 18, 19, and 20 and go and do some of these VOTEC type positions that are going to require more expertise. So it's got to start, I think, doing things at the public school level. I've got friends that have got kids that are in private schools. They're doing a lot of these kind of trade, vocation, shop classes, and I think it's imperative to get the country back, that we've got to get this back into our public schools. So thank you.
Thank you. Ron.
So balance is what we need to be looking for in education. And we have had kind of an assembly line program in schools, and we've kind of gotten away from the VOTEC and the like. But truth of the matter is we're seeing a resurgence in that. And Oak Harbor built a whole new industrial arts section. Other countries begin testing kids in middle school to see what their strengths are and giving them opportunities to spread out. I think that's incredibly important because we're all individuals. Every brain is different. Every brain has strengths and weaknesses. The they begin to choose by the time they're 14 as to what they want to do. But we don't always allow them to do that in our school system. Mike Rowe the other day was talking about when he graduated, they're about the same age. And if you thought about going to a trade school then, you were really encouraged to go to a four-year university. I fortunately had the opportunity to go to a four-year university, but to be involved in an applied program. 50 years ago, Washington State University put applied learnings in with the ag program. So we were managing a farm while we were going to school. Those kind of learnings are just irreplaceable. So our trade schools young, our trade schools older, but encouraging them. The cost of college now is absolutely out of sight. And for a lot of these degrees, there's no way they're going to pay off the debt that they incur to get there. So yeah, I've supported the trade programs through my time in the legislature and before that. So let the kids pick their strengths and support them in that endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet.
I think we all loved this question. It's a great question, and I think it's important to us because many of us, I raised 11 kids. I need those kids to be fiscally independent of us. We couldn't support 11 children today. So we need pathways to livable jobs for our kids. And there was a point at time when it was all, cradle to college. And what we know is there are multiple paths to get to living wage jobs. College, for some of them, is the right pathway. We have one child, she went to community college, said, this is not my thing, went on, got job training, and actually was of our kids probably the first to be financially independent, and we were very proud of her. I've worked on healthcare pathways in my work as a social worker. The idea that we can take and move from CNA to RN to ARNP and build that healthcare workforce. The important behavioral health. One of our kids is a peer support specialist, so the importance of recognizing that we have peer support programs as well as the clinical programs and all of the things that support a behavioral health task force. I'm supported by several unions, IBEW, Building and Trades, but I think the thing I've worked on most closely in the last couple of years is the expansion of internet in our rural communities. And I hosted a regional event for all 5 counties that had our WorkSource sites, our unions, and our broadband providers and our county commissioners out at Snow Isle Tech Center, recognizing that we can build, we have $1.2 billion coming to Washington State to expand broadband. We need to make sure that the jobs that happen are local jobs, not folks that are shipped in from other states. So we're working with Snow Isle Tech Center to make sure that we start in the high school to begin apprenticeship programs so that kids are ready to take these new jobs and move into living wage jobs going forward. So that's what we're working on today as county commissioners, and that's what we'll continue to work on, is living wage jobs for people that live and work here.
Thank you. Because we have a little extra time, we're going to ask an extra question. What are your top priorities going to be if elected? And we'll start with Carrie.
I think that I've pretty well said education. I think rule of law and our public safety have got to be looked at. When I was running for Congress in 22 and the law enforcement bills that were coming down, it was extremely disconcerting to me. I've got some domestic violence advocacy work, and that was the first thought when those bills started coming down, is the victims were going to be the people that were going to suffer the most. So I think education, the future of our kids, and basically what's going to make this state better than what it is today.
Thank you. Ron.
So we are assigned committees, and I've been blessed enough to move into ranking and assistant ranking on some of those committees. So that oftentimes, unless something comes out of the district that we need to address, that's where our legislation rides, is with those committees. So I will continue on to the natural resources, which is Department of Ag, Parks, Department of Natural Resources, and Department of Fish and Wildlife is the fourth one there. Health and long-term care, behavioral health, substance abuse, we'll continue to work on that. Fentanyl test strips ended up being on the state list of drug paraphernalia. Really a silly classification. We started off with legislation. I worked with a member of the House, Tina Orwell, who I went to high school with in Oak Harbor, and we pushed that through. It ended up going in another piece of legislation, but then when we were done, it was no longer listed as illegal, as paraphernalia. We'll continue on with the health and long-term care. Importantly, in Ways and Means, our team is able to look and see where we can come up with. And a couple of years ago, we've got a sea dike that needs to be replaced north of Stanwood. We were able to find $700,000 that hadn't been used in prior projects that we were able to swing over into that. So it'll be the same sorts of things if something comes up, but we'll follow along the lines of the committees that I've been assigned by our caucus. Thank you.
Thank you. Janet?
A lot of my work over my 30-plus year career has been supporting families, seniors, and the communities where people can thrive in the communities we live. So I'll continue to work on working families issues. That includes living wage jobs and workforce protections, support for affordable housing, childcare, lowering the cost of food and medicines. I also want to address the fact that in our long-term care system, I've been asked to really address and advocate. I worked on the first paid caregiver bills with SEIU back in, I guess it's been about 15, 20 years, where we now have a professional and paid caregiving workforce for everyone except spousal caregivers. And I have too many of my friends who are forced into choosing between caring for their spouse or getting forced into poverty, and I think that's going to be one of my top priorities as I continue my work in healthcare. We have to address transportation in our state. We have reducing revenue for our roads because of the gas tax issues. We have to take a look at that, a hard look at revenue issues in our state, and we have to take a look at the ferry crisis and make sure we're stepping up to solve the ferry crisis. I think he's not here, but I'd give Rep. Paul and the Ferry Caucus a lot of credit for his work on that board in making sure we address both the workforce shortage and begin a plan that makes sure we're funding enough ferries. The ferries we have in the plan now, 5 new ferries coming up, but then a ferry every other year to make sure we don't repeat this problem, that we have sustainable ferry funding and the infrastructure for our ferries going forward.
Thank you. Klein?
So this is a challenging question again because there's just so many priorities and so many concerns I want to share in Olympia, but I'll just kind of limit it to 3. The first is lowering your cost of living. The past year, I worked with a great colleague of ours, Representative Sharon Wiley, like I mentioned, expanding the property tax exemption for low-income veterans, seniors, and people with disabilities. We also, I co-sponsored a bill with a wonderful colleague, Representative Amy Wallen, on tax incentives for converting underutilized commercial buildings for affordable housing, because no one's using those buildings. So how do we make affordable housing more affordable? So that's my goal. My focus has always been to lower your cost of living, and I continue to look for ways to lower property taxes or lower other tax sources. Second is healthcare. I'm hoping to shift to the healthcare committee, hopefully, in January. So that in the past, so last session, I co-sponsored a bill that caps asthma medications and EpiPens, and I also voted yes the year before to cap insulin. So how do we cap those really incredible life-saving medications so that you don't have to pay so much for these medications that you need? And then finally, third is housing again. Making affordable housing more affordable so that everybody can actually live in their home and actually purchase a home. So I'm working on incentives and ways like 3D printing technology to make sure that young people who want to be homeowners can buy homes, and seniors who don't want to be removed because of rising property taxes can remain in their homes. So thank you.
Thank you. And then for the last question for each of you, each of you will be given 1 minute to ask a question of your opponent, and then please limit your response time to 1 minute. We'll begin with Ron.
Thank you. One of the biggest issues that I've had in Olympia is accountability. And it was my letter to the state auditor that caused the audit of the Employment Security Department that we determined there had been $800 million lost during the pandemic. So, Commissioner St. Clair, you've sat on the Island Transit Board for a period of time here. I think that we're all aware in Island County of the problems that have come out of the Island Transit Board. There was a salary study done, and yet the executives took the majority of the increases. The union bus drivers weren't awarded an increase. The executive director was relieved or left. There's other executive members of the team that are on leave. How can this happen with oversight of a board of a public agency like that?
That's a great question, and I really do appreciate the question. It has been such a challenge. This is not the first crisis faced by Island Transit in the last several years. We had a salary study, Common Practice, commissioned on our transit agencies, and the salary study came forward and talked about where our salaries should come. In December, we approved moving forward on raising salaries, and then the board asked several times to see the breakout of those salaries and where they got applied, and instead we were pushed off, and when we found out a couple months into it that how that had got applied, the issues he raised, the board chose to end the employment of the executive director. We're finishing our executive director search. We also terminated, this is all public knowledge in the papers, the employment of the head human resources person, knowing that she was significantly involved in those decisions, and we are completely restructuring the agency with greater transparency and accountability. I appreciate the question.
Thank you. And now, Janet, your question.
Senator Mazzal, earlier you said it's important to walk into a room and not villainize the opponents. And yet in the forums we've been in, you often will talk about the last several years and talk about the majority party as being at fault for the problems in our state. So my question for you is, what have you done in the last 5 years to solve those problems and address the issues you're raising to come to some consensus and solutions?
Thank you. I think that my legislation speaks for itself. You don't get unanimous bills across the floor of the Senate in the House by villainizing those across the aisle. I think responsibility has to lie with the majority. They're the ones who control the purse strings. They're the ones who control legislation. I work across the aisle. The seconds on my bills are members across the aisle. The truth of the matter is accountability isn't giving up. Accountability is accepting responsibility. And the majority has again and again pushed through legislation, and we see a bunch of initiatives right now that are going to be on the ballot that are a result of the majority pushing things through that had no support from the minority caucuses. They were just decisions made on their part that we want this without good evidence, without good data, and we're going to push it through. So accountability sometimes is uncomfortable, and I don't have a problem doing that, but that's where it lies.
Thank you. Next will be Clyde.
Gary. So as a Vice Chair of House Education, the budget is a huge challenge. Since I've been in, we've advocated for increased state funding for special education, to increase the cap, to target rural communities for school construction. This is a very challenging problem, so I apologize. But I would love your take on, what you think, how we should kind of work this education budget. I'm always looking for new ideas.
So I think one of the things that I really would like to have done is to have complete accountability starting at the top. Washington State has extremely high superintendent and even some of the teachers' salaries. And I think that we need to start looking at that very closely and figuring out why and how that's happening. Also, like I said, the education system's very broken. And I'm curious, where is the money? Almost every year in Island County, it seems like there's another levy that's going through, and every year I look at my property taxes going up, 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 that are going for schools, and I'm trying to figure out where that money's going when our kids are failing. Because the bottom line, my concern isn't for the salaries, it's for what the kids are doing. So I think the budgets have got to be looked at very, very under a microscope. We need to know exactly where and how that money's being spent. So.
Thank you. And now, Carrie, your question.
So I had a question about one of the bills that was passed last session, 1889, which was undocumented workers were given certification and licenses. And I would like your take on why you voted the way you did.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I don't remember the specifics, but from what I can recall, it provides critical certifications or even services and some funding to undocumented individuals. You know, I think this is, in a more broad sense, we understand that Skagit County, for example, has a very large Spanish-speaking or Latino population. A lot of them are farm workers. A lot of them are trying to afford housing to service us, to provide food, and to provide some service to our businesses, for example. And they're struggling. I speak with them quite often. And so, you know, while a lot of folks are concerned, and I'm concerned as well on exactly where our money goes, I think it's important to also be concerned about how do we support those who are vulnerable, and equally important, how do we support those who are supporting us. And so that was the main motivation of that bill, I believe, and the main motivation of my yes vote.
Thank you. And now for the closing statements. Each candidate will have 1 minute. We will begin with Janet.
So thank you for having us here tonight. I've always worked in public service as a social worker and now as an Island County Commissioner. My focus is always on people. It's a very pragmatic focus. How do we identify the problems that we're facing? How do we identify the resources needed to solve that problem? And how do we make sure we actually follow through on those solutions? It's as simple as the permit that I'm walking through our county right now. And not only are we walking it through, but what lessons can we learn about doing our process better? And it's as complex as educational funding, healthcare, and the other issues we face. Many of my work has focused on policy at the local, state, and federal level. I'm curious, I work hard, I listen, and I plan on continuing that work in Olympia, serving people, not politics, and solving the problems that matter to the everyday lives of the people we serve. I appreciate the chance to be here today. It's a privilege to be in public service, and I appreciate your time and interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Clyde.
So this is my favorite part of campaigning, to meet with all of you and to understand that us folks are involved in the political dialogue and process. This is important. You know, campaigning is exhausting, it is emotional, it is one of the most challenging endeavors I've ever done in my life. But also at the same time, it is the most meaningful thing I've ever done. During session, there are so many emotional moments because we know that every time I press that yes button or the no button, it affects all of us. And so I take this job extremely serious because I know how much personal and professional sacrifice it takes. And I think it's designed to do that so that we have leaders, we have public servants that knows what it means to truly serve you. So I've had a wonderful time, and I look forward to hopefully serving you again on such meaningful bills moving forward for our kids, for ourselves, and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie.
So one of the things that I really am concerned about is the initiative process that's going, with it. We're bringing initiatives for the voters. There's processes, the referendum process is gone, and basically the initiative process is the only process that we have left as citizens. And I believe that it's being targeted to do away with, and that is a huge concern. I would like to see the sanctuary status in this state removed, period, because I think part of the problems that we're dealing with in this state and in the country are due to the sanctuary situations. I am literally coming into this with no political background other than I believe that I need to step up, do my piece, my part, and be the voice for the people that do not or cannot or will not be their own voice. But I'm coming in to represent you all. I feel that this is an important process to keep this great state where we all live and love that we've chosen, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you for you all coming, and thank you for putting this on.
Thank you. Ron?
Thank you, and thank all of you for showing up this evening. The truth of the matter is that the sign of a good manager is their ability to adapt. And I make the decisions in Olympia just like I do on the farm. I gather all the data, talk to all the people, and then make a conscious decision. Sometimes that doesn't include going with my caucus. Sometimes that means that I'm the one lone vote or one of a few that votes against the caucus because I feel strongly on those things. Sometimes it includes getting things that are not expected. I recently received a letter from the Washington State Hospital Association for a $600,000 proviso, which allows rural hospitals that don't have OBGYN centers to collaborate with the University of Washington to provide abortion care. The truth of the matter is, we do things because they need to happen. We do things because they're right. And that is the way I approach my job every day. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all the state candidates for participating. You may now exit the stage, and please give these candidates a round of applause. And then will all the county commission candidates please take the stage? Okay, for introductions, each candidate will have 2 minutes, and we will begin with Riley.
Can you hear me? There we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Riley Fleury. I'm running for County Commissioner District 1. Reason I'm running is Skagit County is my home, and I'm an invested member of this community. I've lived here in Skagit County for over 20 years. I'm the oldest of 10 children, same mom, same dad, no twins. And I learned how to be a leader early on in my life. And I must have done a good job because all my siblings still love me and they tell me that, and I think they're telling the truth. And I want to preserve this county's future. I want to be able to raise my future family here. And I'm not a career politician. I'm just a guy answering the call of duty and serving my county. And I just have there's many things that are important to me, but the main 3 things that I really care about in this county is improving everyone's way of life and listening to the community and what will help them grow and thrive in our county. And that's what I'm about.
Thank you. Peter.
Okay, great. I grew up in a mixed household. My mom was a staunch Democrat. She talked endlessly about John F. Kennedy and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. My father, on the other hand, was a serious Republican. And he ran campaigns in Whatcom County for the Republican Party. What that taught me, what really is important, is that there are good ideas on both sides, and our job is to listen. I've looked at life from a lot of different directions. I've been a successful business owner. I owned restaurants when I was young. I've been in government as staff. I worked in AIDS research in the early 80s. And I've been an elected official, and I ran your public health department for about 18 years. I run nonprofit for a reason. Much good a part of my younger years, I was a Democrat. My master's degree is in cultural anthropology. I work in Seattle in the 80s. But when I ran for Skagit County Commissioner in 2000, I decided to be nonpartisan. I felt it was really important because Skagit County, 132,000 people, deserves someone who works specifically for all 132,000 people. And the decisions I make, the work I do, is always looking at what's right. What's the right answer for people? Sometimes it may land in the Republican side of the party. Sometimes it may be on the Democratic side. But in the end, I go home at night and I think very clearly about what my decisions were, and I ask myself, was that the right thing to do? And most of the time, I feel pretty comfortable that it was. And I feel very strongly also about, in Skagit County, that we worry about things that are just purely county issues. We can't talk about things that are just talked about up here. A lot of those are way outside of the scope of a commissioner work. And I want to say very, very clear, when people ask me about it, I make sure that they understand, is that the job of a commissioner? If yes, then I'll deal with it. If it's not, I'll be very honest. It's not a commissioner issue. And I'm being told to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard.
Good evening. My name is Richard Brock-Smith, and I'm a candidate for Skagit County Commissioner this year. It's truly been an honor and a privilege to take the last 6 months to research and consider the future direction of Skagit County, to ponder at the scale of Skagitonians, its vulnerabilities, and to revel in its opportunities. I've literally met thousands of new people at their doorsteps and places of business to hear directly from them about their hopes and concerns. I know that I'm a flawed human and that I have and will make mistakes, but I will always strive to be better, and you will always know where my values lie. I believe in transparency and inclusion. I will work to expand community engagement, especially to those who are on the outer circle. I'm the first candidate ever running for county commissioner who has a bilingual campaign. I believe in science and facts and that they should set the base for all cost-benefit analyses and public policy. I believe the government is a force for good and that political leaders should always keep front and center that they work by and for the people. I believe that growth will and should happen and that government's job is to ensure proper safeguards are in place to protect our environment and our community. I am a fisheries and aquatic scientist who has been working for 30 years to keep our region a special place, where our children will have many of the same opportunities that we did. I've raised over $150 million to get big projects done. I've done this by bringing together diverse interests to find voluntary solutions that are resilient to our biggest challenges like climate change, poorly planned growth, and housing supply. I'm a two-term at-large Mount Vernon City Council member who has championed better growth and housing policies and worked to provide quality, cost-effective community services for everyone while protecting our most vulnerable. Our budget exceeded $140 million last year, and we employed 250 people. I'm running because I have a sense of duty to solve problems, to help you be as successful as possible in your own endeavors, and to hope that by embracing our diverse opinions, we can do more together. I humbly ask for your vote and your support.
Thank you. Ron.
Good evening. I'm Ron Wiesen. I'm running for Skagit County Commissioner for District 1. As a fourth-generation dairy farmer, I understand the decisions we make today have effect on future generations. After graduating from Burlington High School, I went down to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, got a Bachelor of Science degree in dairy science, met my wife Jan. We got married, came back, and started working on our family farm. So we live in a house my grandparents built back in the 1920s, farming with my 4 brothers and my mother out in the Edison area, milking about 800 cows, selling our milk to Organic Valley. Skagit County needs to work on several different things. the quality of life we have here in Skagit County. We need to spend your tax dollars wisely. We also need to make sure we work with our natural resource industries to preserve them going forward. The quality of life we all enjoy here in Skagit County has to do with how many people we have coming into Skagit County, and right now we're all dealing with our comp plan updates. So this is a chance where the public can come in and help plan the future for the next 20 years for Skagit County. Spending our tax dollars wisely. Skagit County is going through our budget process right now. We've met with the different department heads and elected officials, getting their projected budgets for next year, looking at different forecasts. We're going to have to make some tough decisions here coming up by the end of the year. So that's what we're doing to help spend your tax dollars wisely. The other issue is our natural resource industries. Skagit County has a very good agriculture industry, the forest industry, our marine resource industries, and those are the things I think that make Skagit County the beautiful place that we all enjoy living here, and people love to come and visit and enjoy Skagit County. Please support me, Ron Weeson, for your Skagit County Commissioner.
Thank you. For our first question, we'll have 2-minute timeline for each response. What do you feel is the biggest draw for new business to open in Skagit County, and how will you work to support that? We'll begin with Peter.
That's a great question. I did grow up in a business world. In fact, I could beat Senator Muzal. My first business was when I was 9 years old, so raising cattle and selling them to feedlots. The biggest draw for most new businesses in our county is we've got a great workforce, but we've got a beautiful place for their employees to live. And you all know that employee retention is really hard these days. You can't just give people good wages. You can't just give them an opportunity to move up a ladder. We've also got to give them a great place to live. Unfortunately, with that comes some problems. For example, in our community, we don't have that much power, and we've got to work to get enough power. We've been working with Puget Sound Energy, which you will remember constantly is they're the company that's been assigned to our county. We have to work with them. They're doing the best they can. But to get good power so that we can run big businesses and bring people in is really important. The other massive issue for us is housing for middle income and low kind of living wage housing, because all the young people are living elsewhere and coming into our county to work, taking our money and going back to their own county where they're living and spend their money. That's not a good business proposition for anybody. And especially you're looking at some of our better wage. I'm a hospital commissioner also for Skagit Regional Health. The nurses and doctors in Skagit Regional Health all live in Whatcom or Skagit County. Not all of them. Live in Whatcom and Skagit County, Snohomish County. And so they take our wages. We own those hospitals. We pay them out of our tax money. They take that money someplace else. Not a good plan. So for us, it's really important that we create an environment for them to live, give them the housing to live, make sure that we keep Skagit County a really good, strong place for families. And I do always have to put in a push for our schools. We do have good schools in our community. We have fantastic schools, and we can offer that. So our community has a lot to offer anybody who wants to come into our county with a family and have a nice job. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard.
Well, I think all of you have probably lived here quite a bit of time and realize, like I do, that it's a really special place, right? We have access to some of the most recreational, beautiful landscapes for people to get out and use and enjoy. So that's a big one. Of course, there's also these great working landscapes that are providing jobs and services to the community, like our agricultural valley and forest-covered hills, and a river, of course, that runs through it all and really defines it. I think for me, one of the things that is most attractive for Skagit is the community feel and the hometown values that we have in Skagit. I'm a Mount Vernon person myself, but I know that Anacortes and other communities share that as well, that it's big enough to get things done that you want to do and have fun, and small enough that you run into your friends and neighbors and you know that everybody in that community is doing something to help that community. So I think all of those things are absolutely imperative, that we continue to have policies that support and enhance those things. And so for the last 23 years of my career, my job has been to bring people together with diverse opinions to really define what science says and what the community says would help us conserve these rural landscapes and the resources that are in them. And I think it's a perfect background for the job of Skagit County Commissioner, is really public engagement and finding solutions that work for everyone, because solutions are only real when they're durable and they do work for everyone. And so balancing those different interests is something I would love to do for this community.
Thank you. Ron?
Thank you very much. I think it's a very good question, and I think all of us enjoy living in Skagit County. I think the quality of life that we have here in Skagit County is really a draw. If you have a chance to travel around the different countries or different parts of the world, and you come back to Skagit County, coming down Conway Hill, it's just breathtaking what we have here. But we have to work strongly with our comp plan updates, making sure when we have the new population coming into the area that they go in the right areas of our community. One of the different issues we have is, always housing is an issue, any business coming in here. What can we do to make sure our housing is more affordable? Because we've had businesses come in and look at the area. Yes, we love to move here, but we just can't figure out where our employees are going to work. So we need to really work on that housing issue we have in Skagit County. The other thing, I think we have a great public safety with our different cities and our sheriff's office. They coordinate very, very well. And so they have a drug task force that they work with. And so there's the safety that we're able to do in Skagit County is pretty amazing. The other thing, we have our 911 center that is run by a consortium of the county and the cities and the different fire districts and drainage or different providers. That system is working very well for a small county with 132,000 people. We've got a lot of good things going on. As mentioned earlier, the different volunteer groups. I go to a lot of different fundraisers. We've got the Kiwanis, we've got the Rotaries. I mean, all the towns have these different things. The chambers, they're doing a lot of things, and we have a lot of good volunteers in the area that want to come together and work to make the community better. So I think these are some of the things that we have in Skagit County, and I want to keep continually support all those great things we have going here. Thank you.
Thank you. Riley?
Yes, thank you for the question. I have to agree with Peter. The draw for new businesses and businesses in general to Skagit County is just how beautiful this place is and the quality of life that we have. I mean, like I said, I've lived here for over 20 years, and I can't imagine wanting to live anywhere else. But I see a few issues that are preventing new businesses from starting or surviving in Skagit County, or just staying. And one of the main struggles I see with that is taxes. I think our taxes have gotten out of hand in terms of what businesses who are paying property taxes or they're renting. And as Ron said, the housing, that we have a lot of things to address there. In my opinion, the permitting and regulation is one of the big things that are driving businesses out. Too many regulations, too many permits, takes too long to get those permits. I know of companies who build homes who have moved out of the state, and now building companies from Idaho are coming in and doing that work that they did, getting paid a higher wage than what they were getting paid in Idaho, but less than what our builders were making. And I really think we need to incentivize our businesses to stay here, and so we can have their business and what they pay for. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 2. What are your plans to improve or sustain economic vitality in Skagit County? We'll begin with Richard.
Thanks for the question. So I'm really excited about the new comprehensive economic development strategy that Skagit Council of Governments has put together. I know both gentlemen on either side of me are on the advisory committee for that, and Lisa Janicki is on the steering committee, and we've been working real closely with all the partners and stakeholders. And they've laid out a very comprehensive new plan that we're vetting now. So plans to improve economic vitality include keeping the workforce that we have and focusing on building the things that we're really good at, including advanced engineering and agriculture in these economic sectors or clusters. Of course, building workforce and talent development, having good information about what we need, improving connectivity between those business interests and the people who are doing the workforce training, so that we are continually moving the training to the types of workforce that we need, of course, and keeping the county, the community with a high quality of life. And as a part of that, which we've already talked about, but one of the parts that I want to focus in on in my remaining time is the housing issue that we've known about for some time. And it's not unique to Skagit County by any way, shape, or form, but we do have the lowest vacancy, rental vacancies in the state, and our cost of housing have increased more than any other area in the state. So we've known for a while this is an important thing to do, and it's something that I've been focused on in the city of Mount Vernon. When I first got there, we didn't really want to even have the discussion of density, and here we are today making significant changes, but in a way that the community hopefully gets to continue to enjoy what they have right now. So doing it in a healthy, respectable way. I hope we'll come back to that topic.
Thank you. Ron.
Yeah, very good question. One of the issues, as Richard Brocksmith mentioned, was the CTEDs, and that's the Skagit Council of Governments that come together, and we're funding this study in the group. They're working in different areas to make sure we are doing the things that are helpful to the different businesses, and there are a large group of people involved in that program, and making sure we're doing the right thing. Skagit County has helped fund the staffing for the Economic Alliance of Skagit County for many, many years to help them bring more business into the area. One of the things we have done also is the zoning up by the airport. The Port of Skagit has asked to have light industrial in that area, so the zoning has changed years ago to make sure that's light industrial. You've got to have industrial land or light industrial areas for businesses to come in, because they don't have time to wait for you to go back and rezone property, because the rezoning takes a long time. So we've prepped the different land so it's available for businesses to come in. Prime example, seeing how that pays off is Sierra Pacific. When they were able to come in and build their facility there on along Highway 20, they originally were looking down there at Everett area, but because it had already been zoned in Skagit County, they were able to come in, and so that facility is there, and it's one of the higher tech timber mills in the Northwest here. So those are the kind of things we as Skagit County have to do to look ahead to see what type of zoning is there, making sure it's available for the property owners and for the new business to come in. And also, Mr. Brocksmith talked about the clusters. Over here in Anacortes, you have a lot of marine industries here, and it's really nice to have the industries clustered together so they can trade ideas back and forth and have the small businesses be able to provide the support for those type of things. Over in Cedarwoli, there's more manufacturing tech. Up at the port, there's different businesses that are working together with some of those expertise that they have, and so they can make sure the quality of employees are there because of their jobs that they have available. So those are some of the things we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Riley.
Thank you. So the way I would answer this question is, what is the root issue that prevents economic development and growth? And I would say, in my opinion, that number one root issue is taxation and regulation, over-regulation. So it's my intention as a county commissioner to lower many of the taxes that we are faced with, as well as removing excessive regulation. I believe it's gotten out of hand. Permitting, it just takes too long. It needs to be streamlined. I think anybody who has done any project in our county knows for sure that something needs to be done to fix that. So that's my position on that. Some of the other things would be ag tourism. Ag tourism is something I'm very passionate about, and something Skagit County really has much of its identity in. Because ag tourism does a few things. Number one, it brings money into the county. not just into the community businesses, but also into the county government itself. But in addition to that, it encourages community engagement to actually care what is happening in their county, in their county's identity. And I really think that stems or encourages economic growth. And thank you.
Thank you. Peter.
Well, I think one of the first challenges we're going to have to deal with is again, the power limitations, and we're working on it. And it's going to be, once we get that, we're dealing with that, we'll be able to bring in some of the businesses that are just perched to come into our area, including some high-tech businesses that really do require a certain amount of power. So that will give us some new and exciting involvement with business. But diversifying farming is, I grew up in a farm community. I grew up a farm kid. Diversifying farming is a big deal. When we start looking at not just farming itself, but production, when we started putting in some places back in this area for production, we've got the new place out on just off the freeway, and they're doing some really great dealing with Brussels sprouts, things like that, and that's getting a secondary income, not just growing it, but then producing it and then selling it again, gives us that next stage of income that we used to have all the time when we used to have places to freeze and can in this county, and so bringing that back is going to help our businesses to some degree. Also just always really supporting our schools to make sure that we've got really good, smart kids that go away, go to college, and come back here because we've got a good quality of life. We have to remember that some of us are getting older, and we've got kind of a gap, and we need to bring some of those 25 to 40-year-olds back into our community and get them working. And there are a lot of high-tech jobs that they can work at home. But finally, agritourism is a big deal in our community. We're just working on some new plans on agritourism right now, which I think are really important, and making sure that we get some of these very, very good and exciting programs operating in our community by coming up with some very, very clear restrictions that are being dealt with, and what are the things that would keep them from or will make it possible for them to work. And then once we've cleared that up, then start looking at how we can get agritourism in our business without interfering with the farming community, which is a really big part of it. So all those together, I think, could get us to a point where we're really having a good, thriving community in a very short amount of time with a lot of young kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Question number 3. What are your plans, if any, to provide support or funding to assist Skagit County businesses in transitioning to meet the new green energy mandates? And we'll start with Ron.
Yeah, thank you. Skagit County just passed the CAPER, I think, or CAP bill, CCAP? CPACE. And so what that means is property owners with industrial land or other land, if they have a building they want to meet the new energy codes, they can get a loan from a third-party bank, but the collateral will be based upon the property, so there's something goes on the deed. And so then the bank was able to fund that project to make it more energy efficient. This is one thing that was passed a few years ago. Skagit County, there is no liability to the county at all. We just have to fill out a little paperwork, and the business is able to get the loan from a third-party loan provider, and then they get collateral because it goes on the deed of the property. So that's one of the things that we're doing to help businesses meet the new energy code. There are other options and so forth. I mean, we have to follow the energy code. That's what what is passed by the International Building Code. We have to follow, and the state of Washington has rules we have to follow. So anytime anybody gets a building permit, they have to have the new energy code and so forth. And they keep increasing what is required on that. And about a year ago, we had a lot of people come in a month or two ahead of time to get before the new changes, and so we had a big rush of people coming in getting permits. But those are the kind of things we're trying to do in Skagit County. That CPACE program is a really good program to help businesses with an older building that they want to upgrade. They don't have the funding, and this is the way they can do that. All of Skagit County, not just the rural areas.
Thank you. Riley.
Thank you. I have a little bit of a maybe unpopular opinion with this. I think the first priority when it comes to supporting new businesses and dealing with the new green initiatives and restrictions is the priority has to be the businesses before the restrictions. If we can't, if we overregulate too much, we're not going to have those businesses. And so it's my position to allow them more opportunity to create those businesses and keep them running with less restrictions. Now, of course, we want to follow these guidelines, but we can't do that at the cost of businesses, and that's what I see happening in our county. Is it's just too much, it's too burdensome. So I think we need to take a step back and relook at some of those initiatives. One of the things the county commissioners have the ability to do under RCW 19-27060 is they have the ability to adopt or reject many of these new codes, because some of them just don't apply to everyone. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Skagit County is a very unique county, and I think that some of those guidelines just do not work for us, and I want to know what works for us, and I will allow businesses to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter.
Well, I want to point out, first of all, that battery banks are not green energy. Battery banks are purely a mechanism for storing power that's already been created. And so for us to be told that a battery bank is some version of green energy is absolutely wrong, and especially in Skagit County, not on farmland, not next to a stream, and for certain not in a floodplain. And for those of you who realize that the batteries are made out of lithium, and spending a good amount of my life in and around medicine, lithium is a toxic medicine that they have to, if you're ever on lithium for manic depression, you've got to be tested like regularly, because it's so toxic it can kill you in no time. So that being said, thanks, just needed that little sidetrack. One of the things we are doing, though, is working with Puget Sound Energy to look at places where we can put some huge solar panels. Like, why do we not have solar panels on the top of apartment buildings? Why do we not have solar panels on the tops of major buildings all over our community and gather all the solar energy we can? Granted, this is the Northwest. We're not just have tons and tons of solar, but we have enough that we could basically power a whole apartment building with really good panels on top. And in one case, we're working with PSC. They want to do these solar panels to offset the cost of low-income housing in those apartment buildings. And so it's going to not only serve a purpose of getting us solar energy, it's also going to take care of people who are struggling to sometimes manage their power bills. That's the kind of stuff I think that would really be good for us to have it just as important, coming up with green energy and making sure that it's being utilized in the best manner possible. And for me, making sure that we can reduce the cost for the low-income population would be fantastic. So more solar panel, and certainly not battery banks. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard.
So I want to start with the reason that we have the mandates is the fact that the climate is changing and there is carbon pollution. I am a scientist. I do believe in that. And it's not going to be solved here in Little Skagit County, but we do need to do our part, and we do need to adapt to a changing future. And I think what some people get wrong about it is that we need to do it in a smart way that respects the businesses that we have and does everything possible, and the people, to do that. Because if we don't get ahead of this curve, we won't be able to protect, for instance, the agricultural lands in the Skagit floor that we all love from rising sea levels, which could go from, certainly we've seen a foot already in the last 90 years, and we'll see anywhere from 1 to 5 feet in the next 100 years, and I would much rather see that be 1 foot. So these are mandates that are brought down by the legislators that we elected, and mostly these are not affecting existing businesses unless those businesses are expanding and building new buildings, which Ron spoke to. And when they do this, it does add more costs, like it adds costs to affordable housing. It adds costs to housing. We know that's true. It also reduces the operational costs of those buildings over the long term, and that's why we have incentives from the state and federal government that are put in place to help reduce that burden on folks when they make these important capital upgrades. And so I think what we can do is continue to make sure that we're educating and providing access to those existing incentives so that these upgrades are made when new buildings are built, and we have an easier time in that transition.
Thank you. For our next question, what proposals or ideas do you support to increase housing options and provide more affordability in housing construction? Do you support or oppose proposals for lot splitting, ensuring density for zoning, impact fee deferral and reform, energy code reform, etc.? And we'll begin with Riley.
Thank you. My answer is going to be kind of the same, but I do want to clarify. I don't have 4 to 16 years of behind the scenes like everyone else here. I'm just a normal guy who's looking to serve my county. But what I can tell you is, and reassure you is my resolve to solve these issues. So again, kind of repeating myself, overregulation, I think, is the biggest thing that is in the way of new housing and affordable housing. We need to look at those regulations. I've talked with many builders, some that have stayed here, some that have moved away, and regulation is the biggest thing that is stopping that, or overregulation. Again, I think taxing also, overtaxation plays into that as well. We have to use our abilities in county government to incentivize other companies, our building companies, to build in our county and not move somewhere else.
Thank you. Peter.
One of the things we're looking at that's going to be a rule in our community will be ADUs, alternative dwelling units, and being able to put those on your property. If you own a large farm, you still have to keep it within the 1 acre footprint that's allowable for farming and building. But there's a couple of pieces to that. If an ADU, if you're an older person, an ADU sounds really good. If you have a young person who wants to move back to home and take care of you as you get older. So we're allowing older people then to kind of age in place, which is a much, much more attractive way than going into some version of housing. Also, we've been talking a little bit about just employee housing. How do we do employee housing? When I was living in Aspen, we used to do employee condos, and employee condos were designed so young people could buy into the condo market. They could start gaining some equity, but at the same time, because it was for employees, it couldn't go beyond what was the average increase in value, increase in wages. It didn't go with the value of property, but it stayed with the CPI. And so it was really nice to see young people being able to get in, start gaining some equity, but not using it just so they could build it up and sell it again and make it difficult for other young people. So they were always available. Those worked really well. The lot splitting, that's not a county issue. We have to keep in mind that, again, the county has only 20% of the housing. That's all we're allowed to have. And so a lot of the issues you talk about are more city concerns. Right now we're at 23% of the county's housing, and so we are pretty much stalled out. We have to make sure that more of the growth goes in the city. On the other hand, we can help fund some of the projects in the city to encourage really good housing within the city. So we can't solve it in the county, but we can subsidize and encourage it within the city. The energy code reform, I get frustrated by it. I just think that sometimes of course, I am also, like Richard says, I am a scientist, and I like to be able to measure things. And I don't think we've done anywhere near a good enough job measuring things like about carbon sequestration and all the things that are being used to dictate a lot of our energy concerns. I'm sorry. I didn't hear the bell.
Thank you. Richard.
I agree with Peter to what he shared, in that what is shared here as far as sort of specific questions are mostly city issues, and these are things that we've been working on at the city scale. It's really important for the county and everybody in the county is to recognize that city dwellers like me have a role in keeping Skagit County a special place, because there are more people moving here, and the longer we put our head in the sand and don't allow the appropriate kinds of development in the cities, the more pressure there will be on commissioners to do things like fully contained communities, which my opponent voted for to study multiple times, adding into the comprehensive plan. I am dead set against that. And so what we really need to do is figure out at a city level what those cities' residents are willing to take that will keep that quality of life in that city, yet continue to add density in those cities. So at the county scale, the question of affordability in housing construction, yeah, lot splitting is not really the answer for us. We're in conservation mode, except where platting is already allowed at the county scale. That does happen. And where we can add accessory dwelling units and where we can add duplexes into our LMIRDs, or limited areas of more intensive rural development. I'd also like to look at the potential to do some limited workforce housing in our only urban growth area in Skagit County, and that's around the airport, where there are some places that are outside of the FAA buffer zones for safety, Federal Aviation Authority, I guess. So I think there are plenty of ways for us to add some of that density in the county and still preserve our natural resource lands, which is our priority in the county.
Thank you. Ron?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. As Richard mentioned here, Skagit County in the rural areas, ADUs, we've already passed that. Any lot that's out there in the rural areas, you are allowed to put an ADU, which is accessory dwelling unit. It has to be the same, within so many feet of the existing building. It has to be the same utility area. We don't want to have another driveway coming into the property. So we've already done that. We've allowed 80 units in the rural area. One of the things people talk about is maybe have condos or duplexes or something in the rural area. One of the issues we have in the rural area, we aren't allowed to extend the sewer line. So you have to have everything on septic. And so depending on what the soil types are and everything, how their septic could work on that type of thing. So it's more difficult for the county to have high density housing in the rural area. Impact fees, the county does not have any impact fees. We charge the cities or the school districts are the ones that have the impact fees. The county collects it, but the county does not charge a fee for the county type of thing. But the impact fee is a process that the counties, because they come to the county, get the permit, we have to charge the impact fee, but it goes back to the schools. That's what we're collecting currently. Richard mentioned fully contained communities. As we mentioned before, the Growth Management Act, the goal is 80% of the population to go in the cities and urban growth areas and 20% in the rural areas. We're about 23, 24% in the rural areas. But that's what the Growth Management Act requires. One of the things with the new comp plan updates, we have to look at the average median income. And so the whole county has to look, even the cities and in the rural areas, where's that 0 to 30% average median income going to be, and where's that 30 to 50%? So the county's going to have to look at some areas where we may have to do some other type of thing just because of the regulations coming down with our comp plan.
Thank you. Question number 5. How do you plan to ensure the future legislative policies fully recognize the importance of farms and agricultural services, particularly in areas like Skagit County, where diverse crops and food production play a crucial role in the state's economy? We'll begin with Peter.
This is a great one. I mean, I have to mention too many times, I was a farm kid. Farms matter a lot to me. And so we need to make sure, for one, that we have ways that we can keep people from breaking up some of our farms. We have the 40-acre minimum in our county. It's a very important minimum. Of course, there are some 20-acre and 10 acres. Those kind of predate the 40-acre. The 40 acres just to make sure that we never break this place up and turn it into a bunch of little mini farms. And so, and the mini farms could be okay, but as I was in East Coast a little while ago, a lot of mini farms just turned into places where there are riding arenas and places for their horses to live, not a real farm where we actually grow some food, which is really essential. Diverse crops, that's certainly part of the farmers' decisions, but I think to make farms more diverse crops, again, we have to get some really good production opportunities around here so we can get farm products produced quickly and stabilized and sent out to a lot of different places. I think that's a really important part of what we've lost, and I think it's something we could really benefit from tremendously. Affirming the legislation, we work with legislators all the time, and we go down how many times a year, Ron? Way too many times a year. And we go down, we just talk to them, make sure they realize. But one thing we did in our county, which I think is really important, is we did an ordinance to make sure that people can't come into our property, like Seattle City Light, coming in and buying property from us and then laying it fallow and not using it for service or for good production. And that's a really important thing. That was a massive improvement for us to be able to say, don't come into our community, take our land and use it for whatever, and make it so it's no longer farmland. And so no longer can you do that in our community, and that will last, that ordinance will last the test of time. So thank you.
Thank you. Richard.
Yeah, Skagit County's current legislative policies at the county scale are already very conservative in nature, which is one of the things we love about this community, that we have these farmlands which are so unique for the quality of soil and productivity that it's overly conservative. And I recognize that some folks feel that it's too conservative and there should be less regulations, and that's kind of the center of the agritourism conversation that's happening right now. What we've heard recently from the state Supreme Court is that King County's efforts have gone too far in the Growth Management Act and not in compliance with Growth Management Act and SEPA, the State Environmental Policy Act, because they allowed certain venues and wineries to go on. And so we're now back on our heels a little bit trying to figure out, because most of Skagit County wants to support, we already allow agricultural dependent uses. So that's already in our policy. And the question is then, where is the line between non-ag uses, right? And does that include venues or not? So that's a really important question. And so where Skagit County ends up with in our comprehensive planning process, and then how we go talk to our state legislature about what the desires of Skagit County are really important. Right now there may be some disconnects, and I think there's some discussion that needs to be had at the county about how that proceeds. But I'm always going to fall back to going out and talking to, having the system go out and listen to an input from the public, figure out what their interests are, figure out how we conserve our farmland and provide as much flexibility to business development and economic development as possible. But conservation is important first.
Thank you. Ron.
Yeah, it's a very important question. I definitely testified many times down Olympia on different issues on agriculture. As I mentioned before, I am a farmer with my 4 brothers. I'm also a drainage and irrigation commissioner. One of the things people don't realize, we have junior taxing districts out in our Delta area, and there's drainage districts and irrigation districts combined and dike districts. So one of the issues we have in Skagit County is the farmland is below sea level. We are at the point when you stand on the dike, you look at the mud flats, you look at where we're farming, we're lower than sea level. We need to make sure we're able to maintain those dikes and maintain those tide gates. Those tide gates work when the tide goes out, the water pressure inside opens a little flap and the water leaves. The sea level comes back up, but the tide comes up, it shuts the gate, and then the salt water doesn't come back in and flood the farm ground. These things are under attack. We've got several different districts that have had failing gates and tubes for the last 2 or 3 years, and they're not able to get permits from the National Fish Marines, U.S. Army Corps. And so these things are really, really critical, and people in the community need to understand how important it is to have the drainage and those dikes being secure to be able to still farm. Because if you take the dikes away, there's about 70–80% of that farm ground is going to be underwater in those high tides. And we as a community need to decide, do we want to keep the farm there, or do we want to let it go back to estuary areas? So that's one of the issues that's going on right now. The critical crops, the diversification, those are all great things. We're working with Viva Farms, with WSU and the Viva Farms. They've got 40, 50 acres that they have parcels available for individual small farmers, beginning farmers to start. So that people will have 2, 3, 5 acres to do little farms, and they start there, and hopefully they can move on to different parcels. We have a lot of pre-existing small lots out there, and so if it was pre-existing, there could be, 5-acre lot, and so there's maybe a house on 1 acre, but there's 3 or 4 acres open for farming, and so is the ability for those people to go talk to those landowners and get some farming done.
Thank you. Riley.
Thank you. I love this question. As many of you know, farming and ag tourism is a big thing for me. I agree with what Ron was saying about improving the dikes. A big way that we need to protect our farmland is by bolstering those dikes and raising them, preparing for the 50-year floodplain, because once salt water gets on that ground, it ruins it. Ag tourism, in my opinion, and I think in most people's opinion in Skagit County, is the way that we preserve farmland. Because what it does is it allows the community to come and see what farming is all about. Because people can sit at home and wonder and think about farming, and when something changes, they don't have that same level of interest that the farmer does. And what ag tourism does is it brings that community in and just shows them what farming's all about. Now, there's been a lot of regulation in this county that has prevented farmers from pursuing many of those ag tourism activities. And it's my position that we need to stop preventing the farmers from using their farmland the way they see fit. We should be following the state and national Right to Farm Acts, and that's my intention as a county commissioner. Because when you open ag tourism in a constructive and reasonable way, it brings more money into the county and more business.
Thank you. For this next part, we'll do the candidate-to-candidate questions. Each of you will be given 1 minute to ask a question of your opponent. Please limit your response to 1 minute. And we'll begin with Richard.
Great. I really don't have a great question picked out, Peter, but how about we talk about housing, something I'm interested in, and I know you are as well. And we started earlier about how big of an issue this is, not just for economic development, not just for street homeless, which is an increasing problem, particularly along the I-5 corridor, but for our families and working class people, just to keep our kids here and to keep our, give our parents some place to downsize to. All those things are really important. And so just maybe a dialogue here, not a gotcha question at all, sort of what have you been working on to increase workforce housing in the time you've been on county council, county commission?
Again, I have to point out that workforce housing in general is not part of because we're only allowed to have 20% of the housing. So what we're doing more is working with cities, and we've been meeting with city mayors and other groups on plans for how we can increase workforce housing. Mentioned earlier about the idea of condos that young people can buy, and they can't increase in value at the regular housing rate, but instead. And those are important things for us, but for the most part, we're making sure that we encourage through any sort of financial offerings we can to make sure that cities can improve their housing and encourage. And I meet with the mayors, and we talk about things like, which I think is really important, making sure that housing not only is being built, but it's being built in areas where they can create kind of housing units, feel like little clusters that feel like communities. Because a lot of our young people, again, want something that feels like a community. You're starting to see that certainly in Cedar Woolley. They're doing a great job.
Thank you. Peter, you may ask your question.
Okay, well, this will be a bit of a gotcha question. I'm sorry for this, but I have to. You call yourself a scientist, and you also talk about your $150 million for fish recovery, but I was on your watershed council, and I asked you many times for statistics about salmon recovery. And what you told me was there was no money in your funding to do recovery, to do evaluation and statistics. And I'm thinking, I am a scientist, and I spent a lot of years in AIDS research. I did a lot of very, very serious data management, and I would be ashamed if I didn't manage the data and was not able to come up with something that showed I was actually doing something with that $150 million, a lot of which came from people like Seattle City Light.
That's a great question with a great answer, and that is the state has established a long-term monitoring program which shows some of our basic program types, like planting trees, shade and deep streams and decreased temperature, and having fences keeps cows out of streams, and replacing culverts actually passes fish up to where they can spawn. The Skagit River is actually the most heavily studied river system in Puget Sound. And we've been engaged in restoring estuary access to wetlands for the last 12 years or so with the Intensively Monitored Watershed Program. And a group of federal, state, and tribal biologists have published peer-reviewed articles that show we've increased the return of adult Chinook salmon by 40%. So it's a 40% increase from the work that we've done. Now, there's not enough estuary habitat to do that much more. We really only need another 1,000 acres to get to the recovery goals. But we know this works, and there's plenty of monitoring to show it works.
Thank you. Ron, you are able to ask your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Riley, what research have you done or understanding of a local county government? We have over 700 employees, 17 different bargaining units. How is your experience going to come in and be a county commissioner? How would you do the research? How have you come to your decisions on what are you going to do as a county commissioner with that type of position you're running for?
Oh, thank you, Ron. Yes, I've done a lot of research. Obviously, there's a lot of things that I can't know until I'm in a position that you have. But I've studied the Constitution for many years, and my biggest thing is following that over any regulations that may conflict with that. So we have all these different issues in the county, all these different things that we need to do to help the public. And one of the things I see in that is there's kind of this excuse that, well, that's not something a county commissioner does, so we're not gonna do that. And my answer to that is, even if I can't do it, I'm going to find someone who can and collaborate with them, whether it's the cities or the state, and get them to help the public out. That is my intention.
Thank you. Riley, you may ask your question.
My question, Ron, is, as you know, companies like Seattle City Light and other adjacent Seattle companies have been coming in here and buying up our land. A lot of our farmland. Right now, they're at about between 12 and 13,000 acres. My question is to you: what measures are you going to take to not only prevent them from taking more of our precious farmland and incentivizing them to use it, but also how are you going to get them to adhere to our tax laws?
As somebody who looks at the Constitution and the right of private property and so forth, I don't believe Skagit County can tell a private individual you can't sell your property to another company, another person. And so I don't believe Skagit County has the authority to say, you've got all these acres in the county and you can't buy it just because you're going to take it off the tax rolls. The county doesn't decide who comes off the tax rolls. These are state laws that are passed by our legislator on what allowed, so government agencies. So they don't have to pay on the taxes. One thing, because Seattle City Light is a Seattle city, they're a government agency. I mentioned before that we have 4 different tribes in this area, and not all the tribes deal with their property. They have the ability to pay the taxes, or they can request to remove it from taxes. So that's not a county commissioner's ability to make that decision. We have to follow the state laws on what is going on there. But it's constitutional in America. You can buy and sell property as long as it's allowed. So.
Thank you. Now for the closing statements. Each candidate will get 1 minute, and we will begin with Ron.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate the chamber here having this forum. I really thank everybody coming out and staying this evening. I think there's a lot of great things going on in the county. I really appreciate the chance of being at the county commission, and I think we have a great team of commissioners there right now, and I think we can do a good job in the future dealing with the issues as they come forward. We were able to make it through the COVID issue that we had. We were able to make it some of the different, the budget downfall back in 08 and 09, some of those things that affected us. And so we have the ability to look at the budgets that are coming through, make some tough decisions. Is this program going to be able to be funded in the long term? And we've been able to do it. We've had some great success with the EMS levy that was passed just a couple last year. We got the Evaluation Treatment Center was going in between Burlington and Cedar Woolley. So there's a lot of great things we've been able to do because the commissioners and the cities have been able to come together, go down to Olympia and say, we're working together. This is what we want to have happen. And we've had a great success of that. So that's what I want to continue to do. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Riley.
Thank you for having me here tonight, and thank you everyone, and Ron for all the questions. My name is Riley Fleury. I'm running for County Commissioner District 1. If you'd like to know more about me, you can go to my website, riley1.com. That's the number 1. I have many issues that I'm about, but to break it down into just 3 things. Number 1, farming and ag tourism. I really believe we need to put more focus into preserving that. Number 2 is taxation and privatization of certain county obligations to reduce those taxes. And number 3, housing deregulation of certain excessive regulation and streamlining the county permitting process. I'm not a career politician. I'm just a 27-year-old man who enjoys the freedoms and liberties of this country and this county. And I am here to answer the call of duty of people who've asked me to run. So thank you. I've been Riley Fleury.
Thank you. Peter.
Well, I've worked in Skagit County since 1985. I'm going to go totally off script here because I think it's really important. We didn't talk enough about health and safety, and health especially in my passion, what I lived with for years. One thing Ron just mentioned is our stabilization and treatment center. The reason we build that is because it keeps people out of the emergency rooms, it keeps people out of the jails, and in fact puts them somewhere where they can be treated. We have 64 beds, 16 for substance use, 16 for mental health, and 16 for dual diagnosis, along with an involuntary treatment center right next door with another 16 beds. It's just an outstanding place, not only for the care that we lost when we lost the Pioneer Center North that was on the old Northern State site, but now, so this is our replacement for, and it's just top, it's absolutely as good as we can possibly get. It's going to keep our community healthy, mentally, physically stronger. It's going to, we're putting a lot more energy into young people, counselors in school, working with young people, identifying kids with mental health and potential substance issues. We're doing all the stuff we can to really deal with that very necessary part of living healthy in Skagit County. So thank you for that moment of insanity. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for being here. If anybody watches or listens, for listening, and for the Chamber for hosting. I'd like to thank my fellow candidates for their sense of purpose and running and governing. I believe I bring a new perspective from a different generation that can help modernize government operations to improve inclusion, efficiency, and effectiveness at Skagit County government. I believe I'd bring a different balance to the County Commission, one that better represents urban dwellers, diverse races and perspectives, public health and safety, labor interests, science and conservation, housing, and a willingness to tackle climate change adaptation, in addition to our fantastic farm and forestry interests. I'd invite you to check out my website at richardbrocksmith.com. My phone is always on. If you like what you see and hear, please tell your friends why you support me. And if honored with election, I'd love to work with you and help you be successful. Thank you.
Thank you. Our goal today was to present a fair and impartial format that will aid citizens in their decision-making process. Your vote is extremely important. Weigh your choices carefully, and please mail in your ballot by Tuesday, November 5th. In closing, I'd like to say thank you to the candidates, for best of luck to all of you. Government Affairs Committee and the Chamber staff for their work and effort on behalf of the Chamber and businesses in the Anacortes area. And a thank you to the City of Anacortes for use of this facility and technology for airing these forums on Comcast Channel 10 and then also adding it to the City of Anacortes' YouTube channel. A couple of upcoming events in the community. Hometown Halloween will have trick-or-treating downtown on the 31st. Our November Chamber Luncheon will be the State of the Port Address with the new Port Director, Brett Greenwood, on the 14th of November. And then, of course, always our annual tree lighting event on Friday, December 6th. Thank you all for coming, and please remember to vote by November 5th.